It was supposed to be one of those perfect, slow country mornings, the kind where the world feels like it's holding its breath just for you. The sun had only begun to warm the dew on the tall grass, and the faint hum of cicadas had started their lazy morning chorus. I'd been sitting on the porch, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, watching a hawk circle above the tree line. Out here, miles away from the suburban nightmare I'd left behind, peace was something I didn't take for granted. I had spent 15 long years living under the iron fist of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, where every blade of grass was monitored and every holiday decoration had to be approved 2 weeks in advance. The HOA president, Karen, was the worst of them all, a woman whose sense of entitlement could smother a wildfire. She'd fined me once for painting my mailbox the wrong shade of blue and twice for leaving my trash cans out too visibly on pickup day. When I finally sold that house and bought this property, 20 acres of freedom fenced in by forest and quiet, I promised myself I'd never deal with people like her again. For a while, that promise held true. Until that morning. It started as a low hum, something that didn't belong out here. The sound of engines, far too many of them, approaching from the county road. At first, I thought it might be some kind of construction convoy, or maybe a charity bike run, though even that didn't make much sense on this back road. But then, over the crest of the hill, came the unmistakable sight of not one, not two, but a fleet of buses, 10 full-size charter buses, polished and painted, rolling in one after another like a bizarre parade. Dilliot billowed up behind them, blurring the view of my split-rail fence and gravel drive. My first thought was that they must have taken a wrong turn, maybe heading to the fairgrounds 10 miles north. But as the first bus slowed and turned right into my driveway, that thought evaporated. I set my mug down on the railing, blinked twice, and muttered to myself, "You've got to be kidding me." Within minutes, chaos had erupted where peace had reigned. People poured out of buses, men, women, and children, all dressed for some kind of outdoor event. They carried picnic baskets, folding chairs, and coolers. Some of the kids immediately started running toward the open field near my pond, laughing and shouting as if they'd arrived at a public park. Others set up umbrellas, portable speakers, and even a volleyball net. My dogs, who'd been dozing by the porch, leapt to their feet and started barking their heads off. I quickly clipped them to the railing and walked down the steps, still trying to make sense of what I was seeing. By the time I reached the edge of the driveway, the third bus had already parked and unloaded, and the next one was lining up behind it like a scene from some suburban invasion movie. That's when I saw her. Standing near the last bus, clipboard in hand, oversized sun hat perched on her head like a crown, was Karen. There was no mistaking her. The same smug smile, the same I'm in charge of everything stance. My stomach dropped. What in the world was she doing here? She spotted me instantly, of course, and waved with the exaggerated enthusiasm of a politician greeting a reluctant voter. "Oh, there you are," she called, her voice cutting through the noise like nails on glass. "I hope you don't mind. We're having our annual Oak Ridge Estates community picnic here this year." For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. I just stared at her, trying to process the absurdity of what she'd said. "You're having it here?" I repeated, finally finding my voice. "Karen, this isn't Oak Ridge Estates. This isn't even within 5 miles of your home." She laughed like I just told the cutest joke. "Well, yes, technically," she said, brushing invisible dust from her clipboard. "But our community park is being renovated, and someone, I think it was Michelle, mentioned that you had a huge open space and a lovely pond. We figured it'd be perfect." Perfect. That word lit a fuse inside me. I could feel the anger rising, but I tried to stay calm. "You can't just bring 10 busloads of people onto private property without permission," I said firmly. "This land doesn't belong to your HOA. It's mine, privately owned. You're trespassing." She gave that dismissive little wave I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Oh, don't be so uptight," she said sweetly. "We're all neighbors after all. Besides, no one's going to get hurt. We'll clean up after ourselves." That last part was almost laughable, considering her track record of leaving messes for other people to handle. I told her flat out that everyone needed to leave. She smiled wider, leaned in a little, and said, "Well, that's not very community-minded of you, is it?" By now, the buses had all unloaded, and my front field looked like a carnival. Someone had set up a grill near the fence, smoke curling into the air. A group of teens had brought inflatable rafts and were heading toward the pond. I walked over and told them to stop, that they couldn't swim there. One of them shrugged and said, "But Mrs. Karen said it was fine." I turned back toward her, fury bubbling under my skin. "Karen!" I shouted across the lawn. She didn't even look up. She was too busy arranging a line of tables and handing out Community Fun Day flyers. That was when I realized this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment picnic. This was planned, orchestrated even. She'd known exactly what she was doing. I had to wonder how she'd even found my address, but then I remembered the time she proudly mentioned that she still had a neighborhood contact list. It wouldn't surprise me if she kept mine, too. I called out again, louder this time, telling her that if she didn't start getting people off my property, I'd have to call the sheriff. That finally got her attention. She turned, hands on her hips, and said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. We're not causing any harm. We'll be done by 3. I took a slow breath, trying to stay level. The sight before me, over 100 strangers trampling my grass, loud music echoing through the trees, cars and buses clogging my long drive, was surreal. I thought about the peace I'd built here, the quiet mornings, the solitude. All of it shattered by one woman's arrogance. I told her again, clearly this time, "Karen, you and everyone else need to leave. This is not your property. I don't care what your HOA rules say, they stop miles back that way." But she just laughed and said, "You can't stop us. This is a public event now." I could feel my pulse in my ears. Public event? On my land? The audacity of it was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. For years, she pushed boundaries, telling people what color to paint their shutters, what size mailbox to buy, even trying to control what kinds of flowers they could plant. But this was a whole new level of control. I stood there for a long moment, surrounded by noise and motion, and realized that she thought she could still own me. That even after I'd left that neighborhood behind, she believed she had a say in my life. Something hardened inside me then, a kind of quiet resolve. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply turned and walked back toward the house, leaving her to her community event. Behind me, I could hear the faint echo of her voice, calling out cheerful instructions to the crowd. "Set up the food tables over there. Don't forget the raffle tickets." My dogs growled softly, picking up on my mood. I gave them each a pat on the head, forcing a calm I didn't feel. If Karen wanted to treat my private property like a park, she was about to learn what that meant. I glanced back one last time at the chaos unfolding in my field. The banners flapping in the breeze, the music blaring, the laughter that grated against everything peaceful I'd built here. I didn't say a word. I just took a deep breath, sipped the last cold swallow of my coffee, and reached for the key that hung on the nail by my porch door. The key to the heavy steel gate at the end of my drive. I didn't rush. I wanted every step to count, calm, deliberate, measured. From the porch, I could see the long stretch of gravel leading down to the gate at the end of the drive. The buses lined both sides, like giant steel barricades, engines still ticking from the trip. Their drivers were chatting near the fence, unaware that they'd soon be part of a story they'd never forget. The laughter and music from the field behind me grew louder. Someone had hooked up a karaoke machine, and a few over-enthusiastic parents were singing off-key under the banner that read Oak Ridge Estates Community Picnic 2025. I shook my head slowly, almost in disbelief. It was so absurd, so deeply Karen, that part of me wanted to laugh. But another part, the part that had spent years being fined, harassed, and dictated to by her HOA, was quietly seething. It wasn't just the invasion of my land. It was the principle. After all those years of enduring her petty power trips, she decided that even my freedom wasn't truly mine. Well, that was about to change. The gate loomed ahead, tall, wrought iron and sturdy, the kind you don't get through without effort. I'd installed it not because I expected trouble, but because I liked knowing I could keep the world out if I wanted to. I walked up to it, my boots crunching over gravel, the morning sun catching the brass lock that hung open against the posts. The buses had all pulled through, lined up deep on my property, every last one of them. Perfect. I swung the gate shut with a slow, heavy clang that echoed off the hills. Then I slid the chain through the latch and fastened the padlock with a satisfying click. The moment that lock snapped shut, a calm settled over me, a strange, peaceful satisfaction, like I'd just restored the balance of the universe. For a few minutes, no one noticed. I leaned against the fence post, arms crossed, watching. The scene behind me looked almost picturesque in a twisted way, bright tents, laughing families, the smell of burgers grilling. It could have been any cheerful community gathering, if not for the fact that it was all taking place on land that didn't belong to them. Then one of the bus drivers started walking back toward the gate, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey, he called. You mind opening up? I'm supposed to go grab some ice." I smiled, politely even. "Sorry," I said. "Gate's closed for now. No one's leaving until this gets sorted out." His brow furrowed. "Sorted out?" he repeated. "What do you mean?" I nodded toward the field. "You might want to ask your event organizer about that." He followed my gaze, confusion turning to dawning dread as he realized what was happening. It didn't take long for the rest of them to catch on. Within half an hour, the heat had climbed, the grills were running low on propane, and people were looking for shade that wasn't there. One woman came up the driveway, fanning herself with a paper plate. "Excuse me," she said. "Is there another exit? The kids are getting hot." I pointed toward the locked gate. "That's the only one," I said. "But I wouldn't worry. The sheriff's on his way. He'll help sort everything out." That got her attention. Her face went pale. "The sheriff?" she repeated, voice trembling slightly. "Why?" I gave a small shrug. "Because this is private property and you're all trespassing." She backed away without another word, hurrying down the drive like someone had just told her the world was ending. And then inevitably came Karen. She marched up the gravel in her wide-brimmed hat, red-faced and fuming, clipboard clutched like a sword. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I didn't move. "Protecting my property," I said evenly. "You and your HOA had no right to hold your event here. So now you're all staying put until law enforcement arrives." She let out a disbelieving laugh, that sharp, grating sound I'd heard too many times before. "You're bluffing," she said. "You can't keep us here. That's illegal." "So is trespassing," I countered. "But you didn't seem too worried about that." She jabbed a finger toward me. "This is outrageous. We're your neighbors." I shook my head. "You stopped being my neighbor the day I sold that house. Out here, you're just uninvited guests." Her voice rose. "I'm going to call the police myself." "Please do," I said, leaning casually against the post. "That'll save me the trouble." For a second she froze, caught off guard by my calm. Then she huffed, turned on her heel and stormed back toward her crowd, muttering something about lawsuits and community spirit. From where I stood, I could see people starting to pack up their things, whispering nervously among themselves. The mood had shifted. Gone was the laughter and chatter, replaced by uneasy murmurs. The music was still playing, but no one was singing anymore. The kids, sensing the tension, had stopped running and were clustered near their parents, bored and confused. About 20 minutes later, I heard the low rumble of a familiar engine. The sheriff's cruiser turned onto the drive, lights off but unmistakable. He parked just outside the gate, rolled down his window and gave me a look that was equal parts curious and weary. "Morning," he said. "You the property owner?" I nodded. "That's right, Sheriff. Appreciate you coming." He stepped out, adjusting his hat. "Got a call about a community event causing some confusion?" I chuckled under my breath. "That's one way to put it." He followed me to the gate, took one long look at the buses, the crowd, and finally at Karen, who was now approaching with the confidence of someone who still thought she could talk her way out of anything. "Officer," she called, her voice honey-sweet. "Thank goodness you're here. This man has unlawfully detained us." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Detained you?" He looked at me, then back at her. "Ma'am, are you saying he's holding you against your will?" She straightened her hat. "Yes, he locked the gate." The sheriff folded his arms. "And why exactly are you on his property?" That stopped her cold. For a few seconds, she just stared, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "WL," she stammered, "our park is under renovation, and we needed somewhere for our community picnic, And you didn't think to ask the landowner? The sheriff interrupted. Her cheeks turned a deeper shade of red. I assumed he wouldn't mind. He used to live in Oak Ridge Estates. The sheriff sighed, shaking his head slowly. Ma'am, that's not how private property works. You and your group are trespassing. You're lucky he didn't press charges yet. I stood quietly, arms crossed, letting the weight of his words sink in. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Karen tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. We'll leave, she said quickly, but this was completely unnecessary. The sheriff gave her a long, measured look. You'll leave, and you'll also make sure this doesn't happen again, and I suggest you apologize to the gentleman for the trouble. Her jaw tightened. You could practically see the war between pride and humiliation waging behind her eyes. Finally, she forced out a muttered sorry, barely audible. I tilted my head. Didn't catch that. She clenched her fists. I said I'm sorry. I smiled. Accepted. Within the hour, the buses were loading up again. The field was a mess. Trampled grass, half-empty cups, napkins fluttering in the breeze. But the sight of them packing up and leaving was worth every bit of cleanup. As the last bus rolled through the gate, Karen refused to meet my eye. The sheriff stayed until the last engine faded down the road. He turned to me, smirking slightly. You sure know how to make a point, he said. I shrugged. I tried being polite for 15 years. Thought I'd try something new. He laughed, tipped his hat, and drove off, leaving behind the quiet hum of the countryside once more. When I finally turned back toward the house, the sun was dipping low, painting the fields in gold and amber. The grass would grow back. The noise would fade. But that moment, the look on Karen's face when she realized she couldn't bend the rules of my world, that would stay with me forever. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat back on the porch, and watched the gate, still locked, still standing. Out here, far from the reach of her HOA empire, it wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a line drawn between peace and chaos, freedom and control, and I had no intention of ever letting her cross it again.